Welcome to the What's Your Deal podcast, where we discuss business acquisitions, investments, management, and exit strategies. I'm your host, Matt Euler. Let's dive in. Welcome to another episode of What's Your Deal. Today I'm joined with Chris Peruch. He and his wife, Christy, bought a business about 6 months ago, but prior to buying that business, Chris worked in a W-2 job, which is something that I'm getting a lot of feedback on from people in the community. And he managed to have quite a few businesses while he maintained a W-2 job with his wife, Christy. They owned a home theater business, a food truck business. They rented travel trailers as kind of a side hustle. They also fixed and flipped homes and owned some rentals. Working in his W-2 role, he worked for a data center company where they installed data systems ranging from $250,000 to $500,000 each. So he was able to bring in his career a business division that started from zero up to $120 million in about 5 years. So very, very successful in that career, but wanted to pursue the career of business ownership as a full-time career. So Chris, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, Matt, I'm super glad to be here today. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you being here. You know, it's interesting. As I'm more involved with AMPed, I'm getting all kinds of feedback from people who have W-2 jobs, but want to diversify and or leave their job. And I know in your situation, you did want to leave your job and your employer helped you leave your job, right?
That's correct. Yeah. It was a mutual agreement. You know, this was about a year and a half ago now. I was asked to leave just because of downsizing and whatnot. So it wasn't really a good fit for both of us, I don't think. And it just, really pushed me to do something different. I was, 27 years at IT. I was getting a bit burned out and looking for something new. So it led me down this path.
Yeah. So when you first started looking for a business, you'd started lots of other businesses, but this was a real career path change. Is that right? I mean, you were looking for something bigger, enough to support your family, so you didn't need a W-2 job anymore.
Correct. Well, early last year, I actually set out to be a real estate investor / flipper. That's what led me down this path. So I joined a real estate investor group, mentoring group to learn all I could about doing that, and went to a conference with them. And, they started talking about commercial real estate, and that was kind of on the radar, but it was like, okay, I'm going to, get this residential stuff down first, and then, I'll go start dabbling in commercial real estate. Well, there was this kid in the audience, probably about 25 years old, that was tracking along with pretty much everything that they were talking about in this conference. And the person that was talking on stage at the conference noticed this person was tracking and called him up on stage, just to talk about his experience. So he had done a lot of research. He was looking into buying RV parks and whatnot. And I just found that really inspiring and intriguing that a 25-year-old, kid basically would go down this path, learn about it, and, start making moves to make that happen.
Yeah, that's ambitious for sure.
So I walked away from that conference with just a different mindset of what I wanted to do. And after that, I started looking into things, like self-storage, car washes, laundromats, kind of the normal things that investors do when they go into that mode, right? And it was by chance, one of the dads in my youngest daughter's school had just bought a business from you.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So my wife introduced me to him and was like, "Hey, this guy just bought a business. You might want to talk to him about it and see what's going on." And I thought, okay, well that's intriguing, and it just opened my eyes to a whole new world. I think it's like the best kept secret in investing, really.
That's an interesting approach. Yeah. Lately, I've been hearing more and more people that I wished I had seen and knew about being able to buy a business years before, especially when they worked in a career long term. So
absolutely, yeah. I wish I would have found out about this like 20 years ago, for sure.
That's great. Well, you mentioned about looking at car washes and laundromats and mini storage, and there's huge popularity right at the moment online about, those passive investments. And actually, when you and I first met, you came to me with a car wash that you were interested in pursuing, and we kind of unraveled that and looked at it. And it's I've seen some that can be favorable, but that one was one, honestly, a lot of them I get anxious about because some of the repair and maintenance costs can be so astronomical and keeping up with technology. And that specific one has a very fierce competitor that made me concerned for you. And ultimately, I think you decided the same thing, obviously, because you didn't pursue it. But
right. Well, I appreciate the feedback on that, and just the openness and transparency, and helping me, realize the complexity of the car washes and what all that would take to own one. So, it's pretty cool that you were on my side and not just trying to make a deal happen to make bucks. So,
I appreciate that. Yeah, I take, unfortunately, I've seen lots of people fail in my world. I mean, owning businesses isn't for everybody, and there are some things that are important to do, and sometimes when you don't do those, they are devastating. And so, yeah, I do not take it lightly, and it was fun working with you. Honestly, I love this industry, yeah. And so even analyzing that business, even though I was hoping you wouldn't buy it, I enjoyed the process, and it gave us a chance to get to know each other and how we worked.
Right.
So,
yep.
So let me ask you a question about that. So what was attractive about the car wash? I mean, why did you start out car washes, laundromats, mini storage? What was driving that?
Yeah. So you mentioned that my wife and I, bought a business, right?
Uh-huh.
She was very much, she liked the W-2 job. She liked the stability in that. So when we started doing flips, there's big pockets of time where we don't know if the income's going to come in. We don't know if a house is going to sell. You go over budget, all the things that happen when you're flipping a house. So it was really, I needed to find something to give her some more comfort, mm-hmm. And some more stability in, what we were trying to do from an investment standpoint. So, all of those things that we were looking at had a monthly, income potential. So mm-hmm. what really led me down the path of the small businesses, commercial real estate with small businesses is doing, penciling it out, seeing what really cash flowed for the amount of money that we had to invest. Mm-hmm. And one thing I want to point out about this that again, I'm really excited about buying small businesses. Think it's super cool. For a little bit less than my yearly salary, I was able to put down that amount of money on a business and basically buy back my salary and my next title.
That's great and well put. A lot of people look at investing in real estate, and there's so much knowledge out there about how to invest in real estate and fix and flips and all kinds of ways to make money in real estate and a lot of education about it. There's not so much on the business front, but the reality is part of the reason I am part owner in 20 plus businesses is because the returns are far greater than what I typically see in real estate. And I own real estate as well. But the returns for a business can be much, much greater with far less capital needed. If I'm remembering correctly, one of the things with that car wash that was concerning was that the value of the real estate was significant because it's a fully developed car wash. But the cash flow had been diminished some. And so it just became a point where can you afford the value of the real estate to pay for itself and leave enough left over for you and your family?
Right.
And what you ultimately ended up buying recently, which we'll dive into further, but that included real estate and a business, but the business was extremely successful and profitable and therefore easily paid for the real estate and provides for you and your family. So to me, that was the best of both worlds.
Absolutely.
Yeah, great. So let's talk a little bit about that. And again, I honor your confidentiality, so anything you don't want to share that's personal is fine. When you started looking at businesses, you came to me with that car wash, and then we looked at some other opportunities, and we looked at large and small and everything in between, and we looked at simple and complicated. And the business you ended up buying is a company that sells and installs all kinds of flooring, cabinets, countertops, and window treatments.
Correct.
And one of the things I loved about that business, it was one of the nicest listings I had at the time, was that the owner ran it like a business.
Right.
So he lived remote, commuted up to the business, had management in place, held them accountable. That's very unique in most of the businesses I have. So share with us a little bit what you liked about that as opposed to some of the other things you looked at.
Well, last year we started out flipping houses, right? And some of the listings that we looked at last year were pretty intriguing. I'm a car guy, like anything with a motor. You had a motorsports listing.
That's right.
That really piqued my interest, and wanted to go down that path. And I've got my wife sitting on my shoulder saying, yeah, that might be fun, but who knows what happens if the economy turns down? That's going to be the first thing that gets cut. It's like, yeah. So we looked at a few different things, different size businesses that you had. And, as we started digging into Main Place, the numbers just really penciled for us, what we could afford to put down, what we'd be making. And it just all worked out from there.
I was talking with a gentleman yesterday, and I actually used you as an example because he wanted to buy a business that would require some contractor's licenses. And he wasn't qualified to perform those services. And I shared with him that oftentimes the seller can be the qualifying party, and with certain lenders, they allow that. But I also cautioned him that if he had no experience in a particular industry, as an example, HVAC or plumbing, do not buy a plumbing company if you don't understand the intricacies or the basics of that. So in your business, the one you bought, there were 4 contractors' licenses, still are, and the owner agreed to be the qualifying party on those, which is necessary in the state of Arizona. But you had so much experience in all of those areas from your fix and flips and from prior activity. And so for you, has it been a stretch understanding the technical and mechanical aspects of the business you're in, even though you don't have the contractor's licenses?
Not really. Like you said, just getting the experience last year doing a couple flips, working with the GC and everything that, I had the general knowledge. I wouldn't say I'm an expert at any of it, but I understand how things go together. I understand what needs to be done when you're, putting in a shower and things like that. So, no, it's been great. The owner's still with me, as the qualifying party, which has been great. Really though, he doesn't do a whole lot in that respect. If the guys have something that comes up, they're coming to me, and he's just really holding the licensing. I will say, from a future perspective, we are looking to expand that, and I'm looking to get my GC license. So,
very good.
You mentioned we do flooring, cabinets, countertops, window coverings, all of that, right? And that's what the name was when we first purchased it. It was Main Place Floor and Window Fashions, right? So we've updated that to Main Place Floor and More, just to kind of encapsulate that, we're doing more than those things, and we're really a full home remodeling center.
Which brings up several points. So one is that I had sold that business, I think it was 20-something years prior, and at the time, they did not have cabinets nor countertops. I believe they still had window treatments. But the person that you bought the business from really diversified. His logic, which I love, was, listen, I'm in a customer's home in a small community. If I'm doing their flooring, I might as well be doing their cabinets. I might as well be doing their countertops. I might as well be doing the window treatments. And because your company provides such an amazing service, it works so well. And so I would think there's also, back to you rebranding with the Main Place Floor and More, that you could expand on that even and diversify even further.
Yeah, and we're looking to do that for sure. I think windows and doors, maybe shower glass is next on the list. Possibly whole home water filtration systems to, again, diversify, different sources of income coming in. I think that'd be a great.
That's great.
Yeah.
The other thing that you said that's interesting is that the seller is still with you. So what I see after 25 years of being a broker is that most often the seller and the buyer cannot work together long term. The seller has their way of doing things and it was their baby. And then when the buyer comes in, they want to do things different, or they just have their own approach, and it can be confusing for staff. It can be confusing for customers. But this plan with the previous owner of the business you now own, it was that he would stay. I mean, he was not ready to retire and he was happy to stay on. And I know there was some, trepidation about that, like how's that going to work? But it's actually worked out very well from what I understand.
Yeah, it's been really good. probably a unicorn deal, I would say. For sure. I've been blessed, that he's stuck around. It's been training wheels, because I've never owned a flooring or, home remodeling business before. So having him around has definitely been awesome. We just kind of stay out of each other's way. He does his thing. I do my thing. He's checked his attitude and, everything at the door. He'll come to me and say, hey, I see this. Might want to do something about that.
That's great.
Says his piece, and that's it. I can take it or leave it. I will say the other thing that about the previous owner, a lot of our viewpoints on business align. So I think that makes it even easier to kind of just, pick up the flag and keep carrying it in the same direction that it was going.
Well, that's excellent. And when it can work, it's really amazing. And his primary focus is sales right at the moment, but yet he's there to help guide you if operationally you need some input or even experience.
Yep.
Right.
And is still cheerleading for the team and me, right? So there's changes going on with technology and whatnot, and he's helping champion those.
Oh, that's great.
So it's been really good.
Yeah. So you had mentioned that your wife wasn't necessarily on board initially, but then became on board with this particular business. And I'm a huge believer that if my wife isn't on board with what I'm doing, it's not worth doing usually because life is not fun. Mm-hmm. So what was that dynamic like? Because you two have worked together for long time. Right. So what was it like trying to make such a significant financial decision for you and your family in this situation, and how did you two work your way through that?
Great question. I would say that I'm a good seller, so I'll sell her on things all the time. So
now she might be watching this,
She'll agree with me.
Okay.
I usually are pretty persuasive when it comes to this stuff. If it's something that I really want, right? Uh-huh. So I'll try and find an angle that works for both of us. But I'll say too, if she would have said, no, we're not doing this, I would have pulled the plug and we would have done something else. So, by the time that we were, going under contract and doing all the things to validate the business and everything, she just got more and more comfortable with the numbers and what we were doing. And, by the end of it, she was on board with it. I think she also understood, she's a good wife and wanted to support me in what I wanted to do. She knew I was super burned out, didn't want to go back to IT, didn't really want to go work at Home Depot or Walmart because that's just, I've got more potential than that. And I just wouldn't be happy. So she came along and it was great.
That's great. So what was I think you mentioned it's part of the turning point. She's very financially oriented. I mean, she's books and records and very astute in that area. And it sounds like that was somewhat of a turning point when she studied the history of the business and did the math and realized that this could provide for you all long term, and as long as you kept it going, would be a successful endeavor. Was that really the turning point, or was there something else?
I would say that's pretty much it. I mean, it was really stability driven, what she was looking for. And I could tell you, she wasn't on board with the car washes or some of the other businesses that we looked at. This, like you said, this business was one of your best listings. And I think it really showed when we started looking at the deal and the books and records on the business.
Well, in part, just for our audience, part of what made it so phenomenal to me was I think we had 5 years of tax returns cash flowed, and the discretionary earnings was very comparable. I mean, through COVID, all kinds of ups and downs, and this thing was as steady as a rock. And I attribute that to excellent management, a phenomenal customer service, but also the diversity of the business you bought. And that's part of what made it so unique. A lot of the businesses that I sold during that time, torpedoed around COVID or went away or skyrocketed because they were served by some of the government funding that was available, some of the government programs at the time. But Main Place was just as solid as a rock. And so I'm not surprised she liked that aspect of it.
Well, like you said, you sold this business about 20 years ago. So I think it was 2006 when you sold it the first time. So they've weathered two.
That's right. Great point.
Yeah, 2008 and COVID. They were able to weather through that. So great business all around. The staff is amazing. I couldn't be happier with what we picked up.
That's great. And so you used small business administration financing and some seller carryback financing for the transaction. And it seemed like those feathered together. I know there was some trying to decide whether using some seller carryback or straight SBA was the way to go, but it served you at the time. Are you glad that you went with the combination of the two?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we're saving money with the seller carryback on interest, a couple points, which is good. And again, it's just been, we set him up on auto pay, so he's happy and we're happy to not be paying as much. And yeah, it all worked out really well.
Yeah, good. So I had a conversation on actually a webinar the other night about there's just a lot of people that want to buy semi-absentee, and they're looking at businesses that are outside of their geographic area. And the business that you bought, I know is an hour and 15 minutes, hour and a half away from where you live. So can you talk a little bit about the commute? And I think because of the business, it's worked out okay because you don't need to be there every day. But can you share some insight into that dynamic and also maybe some recommendations for people who are listening?
Yeah. So I did about 20 years of remote work in IT. So I'm used to not having to be in an office every day. So the commute was actually a bit of a struggle at first. It's to get back into that groove and I need to go in the office, but it's super important. You do need to be present, especially the first few months, I feel like, just so people understand what's going on, they get to know you, they can build trust and whatnot. But it's an hour and 5 minutes, hour, 10 minutes away, both ways. Again, it's, I'm going in probably three to 4 days a week. But I use that time to, listen to podcasts, learn, grow myself, and just go in and support the team as much as I can when I'm there. It's been super helpful. Team's on board with the direction that we're going. They're excited about the things that we're doing, the growth possibilities, and all those things. So.
That's great. And you and Christy tag team.
Yes.
So, right? So are you different days or some days the same? Or how have you designed that? Or is it just based on need and convenience?
Yes, all of the above. So typically, when we first started out, it was we'd go in, together, same days. We've got young kids, so she'd have to come back early and pick the kids up. So now we're doing more of a trade-off most weeks. So if I'm in, she's at home. If she goes in, I stay. We've also found with weather and things like that, it's good to have both, at least one of us on this side of the mountain.
That's a great point.
Because we did run into a snag to where I was out of town a couple weeks ago in Vegas for a show, and she had gone down to the valley for something, and she couldn't get back up the hill quick enough to grab the kids. So, yeah, we implemented a new rule that if we're going somewhere, one of us needs to be on the side of the hill to make sure that we can cover for the kids.
Well, it sounds like you're a great team in that way, and I know that from having worked with you, but those are the kinds of things that can avoid serious arguments moving forward when you're trying to tag team a business that's that distance away.
Yeah, you had mentioned that we'd worked together for a long time, right? So we actually met at work years and years ago at Motorola. Motorola hired her pretty much straight out of college in IT, and we were both I was an email administrator at that point in time. And she came in and same position, basically learned it and started running circles around me like pretty quick. So
wow.
She's got lots of experiences with, databases and financials and all that kind of stuff. So she's just the great person to have by my side through all this.
Mm-hmm. That's great. You'd mentioned your team. So there's 15 employees at Main Place, or?
There's 14.
14, yep.
Including us.
Including you, okay.
Yeah. So if you look at it from a payroll perspective.
Right, technically. Yeah. So what was it like when you first got introduced to these people that are all going to be looking at you as and evaluating you? Can you share kind of that process from the first meeting when you met them? Because you didn't meet any of them, aside from as a secret shopper. You didn't meet any of them prior to the transaction being ready to close.
Yeah, that was, for any new business owner going through this process that hasn't done this before, that was probably one of the most stressful things for me, to be honest.
The not knowing who they were, or
not knowing who they were, or how they would take it, if they would all like quit the next day, or, you just didn't really know what would happen. So we orchestrated a meeting with the previous owner, and it was more of a celebration really than a hostile takeover, as some people could see it, hey, the previous owner is going to be retiring, we're here to take on main place and continue to grow the business, and we don't want to make any changes, we're not looking to make any cuts, we want to keep the staff in place. And, I think that helped a lot with some of the anxiety that was going on from the team from that meeting, because it was a little bit odd, everybody was just called in on a Monday afternoon for a big announcement, so there was some tears from the front office ladies. They'd come really accustomed to the old owners being around, and didn't know what that was going to look like going forward. But it's one of those things that you definitely want to plan for when you're doing a business acquisition, and make sure that it is planned. You're on the same page on how it's going to go. I mean, we even did some meetings beforehand. I think the three of us did, just to talk through that to make sure, it went as smoothly as possible. Yeah,
most buyers want to meet the staff prior to buying the business, which is totally legitimate. It doesn't usually happen because most sellers don't want the staff to know until they know the deal is going to happen. And I've also seen it backfire. So I'm an advocate of the staff not knowing until we know the transaction's going to close. I just had a transaction where the closing got delayed significantly by a third-party provider approval. And so the owner decided that he needed to introduce the new owners because there was too much rumbling going on and the word had gotten out. So they had a meeting, and just like in your situation, they had a meeting. Both parties, the buyer and the seller, were on the same page. They did an introduction. Everything's going to be fine and great. But this third-party provider took like 60 days. And literally the competition's trying to hire away staff. The staff are saying, I don't know if this is going to work or how that's going to go. Maybe I ought to just try out this new opportunity. I mean, literally it became like trying to hold this business together.
Right.
And that's the disadvantage of the staff knowing about the transaction prior to it happening, because they're not in the know.
Right.
And the fear of the unknown is what takes over so much. And so it is super uncomfortable. I've seen it a lot. But I also think when the deal is designed well with the right people, like in your transaction, it's good news in some ways. And I think you've shared that some of the staff actually appreciate that you've got a longer term vision, whereas the previous owner was ready to retire and really didn't want to take on more, whereas you and Christy are, let's go, let's do it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's funny that the employees kind of saw it as that, big corporate coming in and, making cuts, or, are you going to bring in your own people? And it's like, no, it's not, I don't have cabinet designers in my back pocket,
right.
To bring in to help backfill this role. You guys have been here for a long time. You're tenured, you know the business well. Like, I see you as an asset to help us continue to grow.
Yeah. Well, and the common fear, like you just said, is most people are afraid they're going to lose their jobs.
Right.
Well, in my world, Main Street small businesses, that the opposite is the truth. I mean, the buyer is usually concerned they're going to lose everybody.
Right.
So it's not the hostile corporate takeover, the big, we're going to cut 300 jobs or that kind of thing. I mean, literally, I'm assuming in your business, every position is crucial.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's just so hard to convey that to employees that aren't in the middle of a transaction, how important they really are to the transaction.
Right.
Yeah.
For sure.
And the business you bought also, part of what makes it so great, a lot of those employees had been there for a long time.
Right.
Yeah, some of the tenures. Do you remember what the terms were?
Our shortest one was probably 2 years. 2 years, 5 years. One of the guys has been there since 2008, one of the sales guys. the previous owner stayed on. He's been there since 2006, so that's
Right.
great. We've got some 1099s that work for us that have been there for 10 years plus. So
That's amazing. So you and the previous owner spent quite a bit of time talking about what he was going to say and what you were going to say to really orchestrate this meeting the way you wanted. And it was important for him. He had owned this business a long time, and he cared a lot about these people too. So do you really feel like that was crucial to how the staff perceived you and Christy coming in?
Absolutely, yeah. If we wouldn't have done that, it could have been really uncomfortable for everybody, right? What we did too that we didn't talk about yet was we scheduled meetings with every employee the next day to calm nerves and just try and put fears at ease, and everything's going to be the same. We mentioned this last night, but we're not planning on making any changes. When one of the guys came in, he was really afraid that he was going to lose his job. And
Wow.
I was just like, no, that's not what we're here to do. Just keep doing what you're doing. Everything's going to be fine.
Yeah, I've seen actually where the staff can rally around the new owner more than the previous owner because now they feel more needed.
Right.
And they want to be, the new owner wants to hear what they have to say. So I've actually seen it become a huge boost for a company when a transition like this happens because the staff all of a sudden they've got something to share. They've got somebody who's interested in them, and that goes a long way. One thing that you did, which honestly, I don't remember another transaction that was like this that I appreciated so much, is you scheduled that appointment to make sure that your kids were able to join you for that meeting.
They're a big part of our lives,
Yeah.
So it was just nice to have them as an icebreaker too for the team, right? Hey, there's kids here. These are real people. They've got a family. This is an investment that they've got stuff to lose here too. You know, it's all got to work out for everybody. So that it was great. It was a good icebreaker, I think, for the team, and it was just comfortable for us to have them there. And they hadn't seen the place; they didn't know really what was going on or what we were up to. So it was just good to have everybody together.
Well, since I've gotten to know you, I've appreciated the family man you are, and I certainly admired how you brought your family and brought that face forward day one. And I'm sure from the staff's perspective, it was like here's a guy and his family. This isn't some hostile takeover or some guy who's, looking to cut wherever he can. So really admired that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about just what did you pull away? I'm a huge advocate of learning. We learn so much in every day, and if we don't pay attention to it, it comes and goes. And if we do pay attention to it, hopefully we get better at what we do. So what did you learn through this process, which is, call it 60 to 90 days worth of, okay, we're going to buy this business, and then all of the financing and all the due diligence and all of the things that have to happen. Do you have any words of wisdom for our audience about if they're going to go through that process?
There's so much. Last year was just a whirlwind of learning. And you don't know what you don't know when you get into this, right? So
That's very true.
I would say, some of the biggest learning points were around the SBA loan, around work in progress jobs, and working capital. Those are the
points.
The big three things that I think that I wish I would have done a little bit more research on or learned a little bit more about. We're getting ready to close the SBA loan. We had a rental property at the time that we were trying to sell. They wanted to put a lien on it, which it meant that they would basically take the profit from that house when we sold it. And it's like, hold on, let's pump the brakes on that a little bit. This is basically another business that you're taking working capital out of to, pay for this business. And that's not what the plan was. So thank goodness we were able to get that under contract and get it sold.
And can I stop you there for a second? Because I want to speak to that for a minute. It's such a huge, the lender, an SBA lender, if they're following the requirements, they have to take it.
Right.
They have to lien it. And in your situation, I think you were anticipating that spec home would have been gone by then. And looking back, I don't know exactly what you could have done maybe to prevent that, but what you described is exactly true. And it could have been a deal killer, right? If they're going to jeopardize, if the SBA lender is going to jeopardize because they have to, one business that you have, an investment in real estate, for another one, you might have had to make the decision, it's time to move on or cancel the deal. I mean, that becomes a real challenge. And so I guess my point, which you brought up, is for people to understand and really look at the big picture of all the intricacies of the financing and all the entanglements, it gets real quick. And that could have been if the spec home fix and flip hadn't sold, that could have been a real turn in the road.
Right. Yeah. We either would have had to delay closing until we sold it, or like you said, it would have killed the deal. So I think we were I know we were super invested in making it happen. So it was just, plow through and do what it takes to get the deal done at that point. So.
Yeah. Well, and being a tenacious broker that I am at the time, the third option that we didn't discuss is I would have had to buy the home, right? So that you could close on the business deal.
Yeah.
But I do try to avoid that whenever possible.
Yeah, I can understand that. So, yeah. So, I mean, and it's not just that, right? It's the liens on everything. Like everything we own has a lien on it. So that was not really something I knew going into this and looking at SBA loans. So I think that's something just everybody needs to be aware of. Now, you have a lien on your personal property, right? From what I understand, it's not a super huge deal. When it comes time to buy a bigger house or whatever, they'll release the lien, let you buy that bigger house and then put a lien on your new one too. So it's not like you have to stop living. They want to make sure that if things go sideways, they've got a way to recoup the money that they lent. So.
Yeah, just real quick. So SBA lenders have to collateralize the loan if at all possible. So the SBA guarantee is the collateral for the lender. But if the lender doesn't comply with the requirements of the SBA, then they can lose their SBA guarantee. And so, if when you end up with a SBA loan and a lien on your primary residence, you go to buy a new residence, they'll roll that collateral in. But if you, like in the situation with your spec home, if you try to sell that, then the proceeds have to go somewhere and they have to lien it. And so, there's a lot to know there for sure. Yeah.
So working capital would be the next thing that, I would say that you want to really understand what the cash flow aspect of the business looks like. I think we went in a little bit light. The first, probably month or two doing payroll was a little bit on the hairy side, so to speak. Just making sure, because that's first and foremost, we got to pay the employees. We got to make sure that they're, taken care of and everything, even before us. So that's what we were doing. So I would say, anybody looking to do this, just make sure that you are factoring in enough money to keep the business going, keep payroll going for probably a good 3 to 6 months. We were probably around maybe a month worth of working capital if we were lucky. So
okay. And so did you request less working capital than what you wished you had now? Or was there, I don't recall if the lender had restrictions about how much operating capital you could borrow, or was it just trying to minimize debt?
It was trying to minimize debt, really. We thought we had a number that was going to work based on, what the business was doing. But going into it last year, with the election and all, I think there was a little bit of downturn in economy and people just weren't buying as much. So the first couple months that we owned the business were pretty light, not really what we were expecting. That turned around December, January, thank goodness, and seemed to be on track from there. So
Great. Any other gems? Any other learning opportunities that you want to share?
The work in progress stuff, I think, is really interesting, and we're working through that still. So for people that don't know what that is, we took on a business that's running full speed, right? So when we took it over, I think there was about 75 open jobs at the time.
And that's the good news, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So there's the ability to collect on those jobs and get some money going into the business, right? I can tell you today we're almost 6 months in and all of those jobs still aren't closed.
Wow.
So there's that aspect of it. And then there's just the aspect of the financial side of it, who gets what part of the income, right? So we take a 75% deposit on the job to order materials. So that way, the company isn't floating the money for the job. Customer is, which is really smart. And then we complete the job and then we get paid the final 25%, and then we're able to job cost and see what that all looks like. And we pay commissions in two pieces too, which I think is a little bit unique.
It is, and very smart.
Right on the front end, when the salesperson gets that deposit check, we pay them 75% of their commission. And then when the job closes, we're able to job cost, see, is it really as much margin as they forecasted, or, does that have to fluctuate a little bit? So we're able to do that and adjust the rest of the commission from there. So, but then there's other aspects of like, okay, we had a job close like right before we bought the business, but we didn't take the payment for that job until after we closed. So, it really should all go to the previous owner, but we pay taxes on it. So, there's these little just intricacies that we didn't, not knowing, the seller didn't know, he'd never done this before. We didn't know, we'd never bought a business before. I think we've got a pretty good spreadsheet now for the next one, though, to kind of work through that a little bit better.
Yeah, well, and that's why it's so important that the buyer and the seller get along. And I've had conversations with people where they're not mixing day one. As far as I'm concerned, the deal's over. There is so much collaboration that has to happen between the parties, even well after closing, that if you don't like the person you're buying the business from, or if the seller doesn't like the buyer, we just should stop. It's just not worth doing. And it's probably a perfect recipe for a train wreck. And so you and the previous owner were able to work through all of those gyrations on all of those jobs, and everybody got what they needed to get, it sounds like. Yeah.
Our first meeting together, I think it was you that told us the next day, the previous sellers really liked the heck out of you. So that was cool, and we liked them too. So it was just, I think that really started us off on the right foot.
Yeah, it's one of the most important ingredients, I think.
Yeah.
So I've learned that a lot of people will watch, especially with social media today, it's so easy to think that somebody else has this amazing life and they can do something that nobody else can and that kind of thing. But what I've learned is that anybody who's been successful in any area of life had somebody guiding them, or they had a mentor, or they had a coach, or somebody who helped them along the way. And this touches me because I wouldn't be where I am today without that. And even this morning when I was out on my morning walk, which is in the pitch dark, I was thinking through the people that I'm grateful for that are in my life that helped me get over tough times or to become successful in an area. So can you share with us a story about somebody who gave you a hand up at some point and really made a difference in your world?
Yeah, I would say I've had great leadership all throughout my W-2 career.
Okay.
I've been super blessed with that. It's been amazing. I could pick out a handful of managers, that had just really invested in me and helped me progress throughout my career. Because I started, in IT at the bottom. I wasn't making, six figures when I started out. Probably more like, 60K-ish.
Okay.
But was able to grow that throughout the years just due to people pouring into me and investing into me. So I think the real turning point was after I got laid off in 2008. Had my home theater business that I did for a little bit during that time. Just wasn't, with the economy, it wasn't the greatest thing to be doing. Even, trying to pivot. And it's like, okay, we'll go from doing home theater systems to selling dish because we can save people money on their, on their cable costs. So that helped a little bit, but it just wasn't replacing my income that I was accustomed to. So I had to go back to work. Went through a couple different jobs, and then ultimately was at a place where I got introduced to a Dell rep. So I would say that they're instrumental. Even after I'd left that job, he called me up, after not seeing me for I don't know how many months. I told him I was interested in working at Dell, and he called me up, several months later, and it's like, hey, I think there's a position that you'd be good for. So getting a job at Dell, I think, was a big turning point. And my manager there, that invested in me and, kind of pushed me along and gave me tidbits of information. Not only him, but the sales team that, I supported were very influential. I would say that I probably wouldn't be where I am today without the last interview going into Dell. Was a sales guy. I was going to be supporting this sales guy. And he's like, well, if Chris is going to be supporting me, like I'm going to, have the final say on if he's going to join the team or not. So it was a tough interview. We went out to Morton's, we had steak and some scotch, but, ended up getting the job. From there, I think it's really, the rest is history. I worked for Dell for 3 years. Went to a partner of Dell's. I was with them for about 10 years. And even to this day, I worked for a VP at that partner. And I'll wake up in the morning, I'll be thinking about stuff's going on at the store, it's like, what would Joe do? Cause he helped mentor and guide me along, and it helped me grow that business, that $120 million business that we had talked about earlier. So, and I want to say also, like, you were instrumental in helping through this process too. Going down this path, I didn't have anybody that had done this piece before, right? You've done it a lot. So you were, always available and answering questions and helping guide us through the process. So,
well, thank you.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think it's important, at least it's important for me, to always remember the people that helped me. And again, there's lots of people that are far more successful than I, but that helped me get to where I wanted to be. And without them, it wouldn't have happened. It's just the way it is. So, well, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah. Thanks, Matt, for having me. It's been a blast.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd love to get Christy on the show at some point too, and talk about the dynamic between the two of you and maybe her perspective on the business that you bought. But also, I think it's fascinating to see a husband and a wife who can work well together. And in all the meetings we had, which were a lot, I always admired the way you two communicated and honored each other in the decisions that needed to be made. And so I'm sure that's a huge part of why you're so successful. So
yeah, thanks for that. I think that'll be a fun episode for everybody involved.
Yep, absolutely.
All right.
Well, thanks for joining us for another episode of What's Your Deal? Look forward to seeing you soon. And that's a wrap on today's episode. We hope you enjoyed the conversation and got some valuable insights into the world of buying and selling businesses. Want to be a guest on our show? If you have a deal that you'd like to discuss with us or a business story to share, we'd love to hear from you. Shoot us an email using the contact information below in the episode notes, and let's make this happen. Never miss an episode. Make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. And if you found today's episode helpful, please leave us a review. It helps more people like you find the show.